In the 1950s, when I was growing up, the newsreels were shown at the local cinemas before the feature films, instead of all those ads. And there were special cinemas in the cities where newsreels were shown non-stop. But when television started in Australia in 1956, the newsreels began a gradual decline. Cricket became rather dull in the 1950s. There were some very boring days in the test between Australia and England. Then the West Indies brought new life to the game in the summer of 1960, and that series was broadcast live on ABC TV.
Bring out your Bradman. Star exhibit in Queensland cricket nursery is this diminutive champion, Ken Mackay. At 14 years of age, he wrecks records. He set an all-time high for Queensland schoolboys with 367 not out. In a season, Ken rattled up 1,763 runs.
This is a classic newsreel piece. It was actually filmed in the late 1930s, but Ken Mackay was to make a name for himself as a cricketer and a character during the 1950s.
University. South Australia may have Bradman. Queensland's got the real Mackay.
When England arrived for the 1950-51 series, Australia had a new mystery bowler, Jack Iverson. You'll notice that part of the image is masked, apparently so opposing batsmen couldn't discover the secrets of his action.
When he was in the army, he spent hours fiddling around with a tennis ball trying to get this one-finger grip that he had. And he was a late starter in Test cricket. He said he didn't want to play with a district club in Melbourne. He played sub-district cricket, which Test cricketers aren't sort of drafted from. But they ended up playing with Melbourne in district cricket, and from then on he played state and Test cricket after that. I think if you basically played him as an off-spinner, you'd be all right, but he got a lot of getting used to because he had this sort of leg spin action and the balls bumped from the off. Most English boys didn't have a clue how to handle Jack Iverson, and he had a bumper season, really.
Lindsay Hassett had taken over the captaincy and won the 1949-50 series in South Africa 4-0. At home versus England, Australia won the first 4 tests of the 50-51 series. Against Lindwall, Miller, Bill Johnston and Jack Iverson, England only made more than 300 once in the series, and that was in the 5th test, which they won. In this test, the 3rd, Miller took 4 wickets in England's first innings and then made 145 not out. Iverson took 6 wickets in the second innings. For England, Len Hutton made 62 and their captain Freddie Brown, with 79, was the only other batsman to make more than 50. Ray Lindwall bowling to Brown. For Australia, Ian Johnson made 77 in a partnership of 148 for the 7th wicket with Keith Miller. The English fast bowler J.J. Waugh bowling to Miller.
At the Sydney Cricket Ground, Australia and the West Indies met in the 2nd test for what fans dubbed the World Championship. Thrills soon woke this pair up when Lindsay Hassett sent the visitors in.
The West Indies had won the series 3-1 in England in 1950, and they were becoming a real force in world cricket. So this was an important series. Doug Ring bowling to Frank Warren.
362.
Alfred
Australia was
Valentine.
spun into trouble by the two 20-year-olds, Alf Valentine and Sonny Ramadan, until Miller and Hassett turned the tide with a record fourth wicket
Sonny
partnership
Ramadan.
of 235.
Although the West Indies won the Adelaide Test, we won the series comfortably. But two of the results were very close. The 4-1 margin was probably flattering to Australia. The following summer, South Africa drew the series 2 tests all. Australia's supremacy was under threat. But by that time, another batch of young players had emerged. An Australian 11 game before the test started included Colin McDonald, a reliable and courageous opening bat. A young Richie Benaud, known then as a hard-hitting batsman who also bowled leg spin. Ian Craig, who at the age of 17 made 213 not out for New South Wales against South Africa and became the youngest Australian to play in a test match. And a left-handed all-rounder named Alan Davidson. Australia won the first test, but South Africa drew level with an 82-run victory in Melbourne. In the third test, played in Sydney, South Africa made only 173 in their first innings. Australia replied with 433, of which Neil Harvey made 190. Neil Harvey's compact, free-flowing style reminds me very much of Don Bradman. Harvey used to practice with his 5 brothers behind their home in Melbourne in a cobblestone back lane, reminiscent of Don Bradman's practice as a boy, with a stump and a golf ball against a corrugated iron tank.
Would have the same result, you see, that he's observing the movement of a ball, he's coordinating his muscles and so on. I was not aware of that about Neil's background, but it makes good sound common sense to me. Whether it's a golf ball, tennis ball, cricket ball, doesn't matter what it is, because he's getting that movement, which ultimately has got to come naturally to you. It mustn't be a forced movement at all. So, yeah, I think that's a good comparison.
Alan Davidson made his test debut in 1953. The lineup of fast bowlers we've seen goes back to Ted McDonald in the 1920s and Jack Gregory, Tim Wall in the early 1930s, then Ernie McCormick, and after the war, Ray Lindwall and Keith Miller. Jack Potter is a former captain of the Victorian Sheffield Shield team and ABC cricket commentator. He was also the first head coach at the Academy of Cricket.
Their basic bowling action is the same. Lindwall bending a bit on the front leg, which is interesting, but he's got amazing shoulder strength. Miller bowling up and over. It's said that Miller was at times more lethal than Lindwall. I didn't play against them. It might be that because of his straight leg, he gets his hips higher and just makes his bounce a bit more vicious. Almost a slinging action. Beautiful run-up. Look at the length of the stride and the balance. But the slinging action, look how low his action is. Bends his front leg a little bit. His back foot's still fairly straight. His hips are straight and he gets his arm across. It'd be interesting to see whether he had back problems. The theory is now you're either all side on or all front on, but not half and half. Looks to me as if he's got a very strong hips and back, just, well, maybe his creams, but very strong. Fast bowlers these days would have much more muscular development in the upper shoulders and the back. Spend a lot of time trying to strengthen it up. Miller gets his back foot slightly side on and he's got a good position there, but he opens up very quickly. Bowled with his shoulder, didn't he? He had a very quick arm. Whereas you'll see Lindwall when he bowls, I think bowls with mostly his body. Linville had a classical side-on action, back foot side-on, almost bends his arm a little bit. Yeah, really interesting, Linville with that hyperextension of his shoulder, getting it right back. Linville perfected the rhythmical run-up. Very similar. I think they both, I'm not saying they throw, they hyperextend their shoulder as they take their arm back, but that's very similar. They could be the same bowler virtually. Davo was side on, and I think that's one of the reasons he was able to get that late in swing. Very strong, big shoulder action.
When the Australians came out to field on what proved to be the last day of the final test, the Oval was crowded with spectators hoping to see May and Edridge stay till 132 was on the ball. May was out to a fine catch by Davidson. "44 more runs to get now, and Compton as Edridge's partner. Slowly but surely the score mounted. It was by no means easy going. The Aussies certainly weren't handing those ashes back on a plate after 20 years. Then, near the end, Hassett put himself on to bowl. Morris bowled from the other end, and here it comes. A 4 by Compton wins the match, the rubber, and the ashes. As the crowds poured onto the ground, police had a hard job in keeping them off the wicket itself.
When the English team arrived in Australia 15 months later, Len Hutton had a new fast bowling combination, Brian Statham and Frank Tyson. England also had real depth in their batting, and they held the Ashes. It was obvious that Australia would have a struggle to win them back. But in Brisbane, the first test, after Hutton had asked Ian Johnson to bat, Morris and Harvey put on 202. Morris in the cap made 153, Harvey 162. Alec Bedser to Morris. Trevor Bailey to Harvey. And Bedser to Harvey. Australia declared at 601 for 8 wickets. Linville to Len Hutton. Millett to Edridge. Linville to May, an in-swinger. Richie Beno gets Compton, caught by Langley. And the game ends with Statham, caught from a Beno full toss. Don Bradman, chairman of selectors, with Jack Ryder, who had played for Australia in the 1920s. It looked as if the second test would go the same way when England made only 154 in the first innings. But Frank Tyson took 6 wickets in Australia's second innings to win the match for England by 38 runs. In the third test, Statham took 5 wickets in the first innings and Tyson took 7 in the second. England won by 128 runs, and in Adelaide they won by 8 wickets.
Arriving at Tilbury, the Himalaya brought over the Australian Test cricketers, 17 of the best and all in fighting form. Keith Miller is vice-captain, but many of the Aussies are newcomers.
We're a very confident side, we're a very happy side, and I can assure you that you're going to see some jolly fine cricket from us and much more resolute cricket than you've probably seen from Australian teams over the last few years.
The 1956 series in England is remembered as a disaster for Australia, but in fact the first test was drawn and Australia won the second. This was Slasher Mackay's first test match. He made 38 in the first innings and 31 in the second. Australia won by 185 runs.
England wins the toss and bats in the third test at Leeds. Lindwall to Richardson, who opens with Colin Cowdrey. Now it's Archer to Cowdrey. He plays it one outside the stump, touches it, and Maddox takes the catch. Cowdrey out for a duck, and England 1 for 2.
The new style of commentary shows that the newsreels at least realised the need to make it sound exciting.
There are more worries for them as Archer has Richardson in trouble. The appeal for LBW is disallowed, but it was close. And now with England's score at 8, Richardson touches one from Archer, and Maddox snaps him up too. England's in real trouble with both openers out.
England was saved by its new captain, Peter May, and the veteran Cyril Washbrook.
Ian Johnson to Washbrook, and the veteran dances down the wicket to drive him straight through the field, 4 all the way. The crowd's a lot happier now. And here comes Washbrook's 50, a great fighting innings that ends at 98. May gets 100, and England makes 325.
Australia was bowled out by the English spinners Jim Laker and Tony Locke for 143 and 140. And this early BBC television coverage shows some of the 19 wickets which Jim Laker took in the 4th test, which England won by an innings and 170 runs.
He's out! 10 wickets to Laker.
And it's Australia bowled Laker. He's taken all 10 Australian wickets, a feat never done before in any test match anywhere. It's the sporting performance of the year.
Cricket had become much more international. Australia went to the West Indies for the first time in 1954-55. The home side had no counter to the pace of Keith Miller and Ray Lindwall.
We only had bowlers like Frank King, and he was the only one fast bowler we had in the West Indies. We did have other fast bowlers, but not in the same caliber. So again, we came up against Keith and Ray. It was something unnatural to us to have 2 fast bowlers of that caliber, and they really let us have it.
The Australian team toured India and Pakistan on the way home from England in 1956, winning the series in India, but losing the 1 test played on a matting wicket in Pakistan.
Having come off that 56 tour when their morale wasn't all that crash hot, to go and have to play a test match on a Koya matting wicket against a fellow of Fazal Mahmood's ability, I think they bowled us out for 80.
England was back in Australia in the summer of 1958-59, and with Richie Benaud as captain, Australia was back on top. But England had started to play the game as if the most important thing was not to lose, and the series produced some of the slowest play ever seen in Test cricket. The Australian opener Jim Burke was one offender, but England's average scoring rate throughout the series was a dismal 33 runs per 100 balls bowled. Colin MacDonald, facing Fred Truman here, was the only Australian batsman to enhance his reputation, with centuries in the 4th and 5th tests. But television had arrived in Australia, and this was the age of rock and roll. For my generation, cricket wasn't keeping up with the times. Richie Benaud made a good start as captain, but the game was under threat, and with so much cricket being played, the players too were under pressure.
Cricketers in Australia are not professionals, but have their jobs. Norman O'Neill is a representative for a cigarette firm. Colin MacDonald works in insurance. Alan Davidson works in a bank.
We all had jobs, or most of us had jobs while trying to play Test cricket, which means that in my case I had to get leave from work to play cricket, and of course getting leave from work meant you didn't get paid from work.
Neil Harvey is a salesman for a glass manufacturing company.
Well, the crunch time came when people didn't want to employ cricketers because they were getting too much time off away from their jobs to play cricket. And it reached a stage there with me that I had to look elsewhere for a job. But then again, you're playing for your country and you're having a lot of fun doing it, and the pride and joy's there. And really, you don't actually think about, whether you're getting paid or not. I think in those days it was a bonus if you got any money out of it.
Richie Benaud took the team to Pakistan and India in 1959-60. They won both tests in Pakistan, and although they lost the second test in India, Australia won the series 2-1. Neil Harvey confirmed his reputation with centuries in New Delhi and Bombay. Norman O'Neill made his first Test century against Pakistan, then followed it up with hundreds against India in Bombay and Calcutta. The best of the bowlers were Richie Benaud and Alan Davidson. Both took 29 wickets. It was a successful tour, confirming the international status of the game. But cricket's popularity at home in Australia would be tested the following summer against the West Indies.
That is the boat that we arrive on, the Saturn Cross. There us in the nets there, I'm bowling to Basil Butcher, it looks like. And there's Wes Hall bowling to myself. I knew that we had a pretty good team. We had a young team. We had just played against India in the West Indies, and we had beaten India 5-0. And Frank Worrell had just taken over the team, and we knew that Frank was going to be a very, very good captain. We knew that he was going to lead the team very well because we all had believed in him. There was a lot of insularity in the West Indies in those days, but when Frank took over the team, he started to mold the team together and build it into a team. So when we came here, we had very high expectations. And that's the Frank Worrell at the other end, because we came in at a time when things were fairly tight and Australia was right on top. And Frank came in and he joined me and came down and had a few words with me and said, well, we got to stay here. We got to try and get as many runs as we can.
The West Indies had come here with big reputations before, but had failed to deliver. Cricket was at a crossroads. It had to prove itself as entertainment.
Sobers the bowler. Benaud plays the ball to mid-wicket. They start down the pitch and Davidson is run out by a magnificent return from Solomon.
We had got the upper hand of the Australian team until Richie and Alan came together. We really needed that wicket, because if we didn't get Alan then, I'm sure we would never have even had a chance of being in the game, because he was batting so well.
Benaud snicks and he's out, caught by Alexander. The 8th Australian wicket has fallen and either side can still win the match. The 5th ball, 4 runs to win. Grout swings, the ball goes high in the air. Paul races across and he drops the ball. A bad fielding error, and Australia needs 3 ones to win.
Years ago, in a situation like that, West Indians would have given up. But with Frank Worrell leading the team, he got us together and he says, now look, come on, let's buckle down. We're still in this game. And that was the difference.
The 6th ball. Mekif connects and the ball flies deep in the outfield. They complete the 2nd run. The scores are level. The 3rd run will win the match. Grout makes a great effort, but the bails go off and he's run out.
We didn't really expect Conwood to get the ball back in time. We thought it was all over.
The scores are tied. 1 wicket left.
I could recall myself standing at square leg slip, matter of fact. And I was praying that the ball wouldn't come to me, because it was so much tension out there. And you knew that one mistake could have caused the game.
Paul bowling the 7th ball to Klein. Mekif is run out, and the match has finished in a tie.
As you can see how everybody ran to the stumps. There I'm standing there, run, can I, Wes Hall, and Ian McKither is trying to get his bat down. And the most amazing thing about this is that Joe Solomon, who was standing at square leg and could only see one stump, in that situation, to be able to pick up the ball and to hit that one stump from square leg was amazing, absolutely amazing.
queues stretch back into Yarra Park before the start of a match between the West Indies and Australia. Crowds from the city come down paths shaded by great elms brought from England and planted last century, much like the game of cricket itself.
Australia had won the second test. West Indies won the third, and the fourth test was drawn. The series was even, one test each, with one test tied.
For Worrell, popular West Indies captain, this is an unforgettable occasion. Tossing the fateful coin is a moment of tension. Australia wins, but Captain Benno sends the West Indies into bat. So the Australians take the field.
A world record crowd, 90,800 people, watched the second day's play, and the match was telecast live on ABC television.
I remember going up to bat, and it was like when they whisper, it sounded like a bunch of beads coming across the field. You know, I've never seen or anything like it.
Davidson bowling to Conrad Hunt. Richie Benno to Canhigh. Simpson to Gary Sobers. Frank Misson to the West Indian wicketkeeper, Jerry Alexander. The West Indies made 292 in the first innings. Australia replied with 356. Wesley Hall bowling to McDonald. Sobers to McDonald. Lance Gibbs to Benno. In its second innings, Australia needed 258 to win. When Grout was out, it was 8 wickets to 256. And Martin might have been caught, which would have made it 9 wickets down. Ballantyne to Ken Mackay, the scores are tied. Australia won by 2 wickets. Cricket had captured the national imagination again in a way unmatched since Don Bradman's day.